How's it going, folks? It's been a hot minute, huh? I was busy for a week doing this. Yep, those toes belong to yours truly. Soak it up, baby. But Netflix, that old thing, has been dropping a couple of new features lately, hasn't it? A couple of films here and there. One of those happened to be a new Charlie Kaufman film, so we're gonna chat about that, aren't we? For those that have watched my channel for a while now, you'll probably know that I'm a huge Charlie Kaufman fan. I've loved all of his work. I mean, he's responsible for my favourite film of all time, and he wrote and directed another one of my all-time favourite films, so safe to say, I like the fellow. I think he's a good chap. So I'm thinking of Ending Things is an adaptation of a novel of the same name. Haven't read that one, so sorry to any novel purists out there, although you should know I'm thinking of reading things, eh? Come on. And it is a difficult film synopsis to attempt to sum up in a review for you. I'm not sure how I'm going to go about it. I will leave the synopsis at this. It is about a woman who goes to meet her partner's family for the first time. Although it's not really about that. This is tough. This is difficult. And in typical Kaufman fashion, it's great. I really enjoyed it. But also, what the fuck, man? Now, Charlie Kaufman's films haven't exactly been the most jovial, light-hearted things up until this point, but I did really enjoy what feels like kind of a darker tone here in terms of genre and the way it approaches the story, which feels familiar to his body of work, but also interesting and different enough to make it feel fresh and new and exciting, and particularly in a way it sort of leans into a lot of the horror genre moments in here. I found it to be kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a scary film. I don't really think it is a horror film overall, but I appreciated seeing a lot of those sort of genre staples in there done in their own Kaufman-esque way. That's exciting to me. I like that shit. And the resulting film feels a lot more like a just headfirst dive through a crazy surreal rabbit hole than it does a typical beginning to end narrative. But I found it to be really engaging, really satisfying in a very strange roundabout way, and just a generally good time. It stars Jessie Buckley and Jesse Plemons as our lead couple in the film, who are both delivering brilliant performances at kind of very different ends of the spectrum. Buckley's performance feels, I guess, more kind of manic, and Plemons, on the other hand, complements that really well, but he's playing a much more kind of quiet, subtle role, which feels more mysterious, and I like the way those two characters just sort of roll through this film. Both were great, awesome to watch in every scene, but also the supporting cast of this one is really entertaining and engaging and creepy and weird. Mainly David Thewlis, who, if you've seen Anomalisa, Charlie Kaufman's last work, he was in that, but he's also in those Wizard films. And also Toni Collette, who delivers another fantastic audition for just crazy mum shouting at a dinner table, which, if I'm being completely honest, is a typecasting I can get on board with. If that's all we get from Toni Collette here on out, I'm happy to stick around. Everyone's great and feels like they're really all chewing on this just batshit, surreal screenplay and world that this film creates around the characters. And all of it results in me feeling, you guessed it, pretty fucking unsettled throughout this entire runtime. But it's like that really strange, deeply unsettling, and yet still weirdly, specifically quite endearing tone, which I think someone like Kaufman could only really pull off in his own way. It's a very difficult and I guess subjective line to tread in a film, and I suppose there's gonna be lots of people that don't think he tread it well at all. But you've got scenes which just feel intentionally very sporadic and very sort of mishmashed and all over the place, but it still manages to keep you feeling interested and engaged enough to follow it. I will admit, I don't think that sort of balance and that line is tread quite as effectively as some of Kaufman's earlier films. This isn't my favourite of his by any stretch. And if I'm honest, I felt that in this one, more so than any of his other films, he does have a tendency to feel like he's getting a little bit carried away. Like it'll hit that sweet spot, and then there might just be a couple of things where you're like, you could calm down a little bit there, Charlie. For instance, in the film, there are these various kind of long car journeys in which we're just watching Jessie Buckley and Jesse Plemons talk with each other, but these pieces of dialogue, these conversations, are intentionally just very kind of train of thought all over the place. They're darting around different topics and themes, and it's very quick, and it's never really apparent what it is they're talking about until much later on, which I think means that retrospectively, in the context of the whole film, they work and they're interesting, but in the moment, sometimes they can just sort of keep going. They just don't really stop, and you're like, this scene is still here, huh? But as I said, it's very much kind of like a rabbit hole film, so you've just kind of got to go with that thing and hope it clicks in the end, And I really like where this film ends up going, and I think it's a sort of film which, scene on scene on scene, just gets more weird and interesting in, I think, quite a rewarding way. The ending of this film I thought was wonderfully done, and it's a sort of ending which just makes you immediately want to read about it and see different interpretations, because you finish it and you're like, huh, I don't know what that was meant to be, but I had a good time. And then it just sort of sits in your mind and claws in and doesn't want to go anywhere. I like that kind of film. But there's so many details which I've seen other people mention where I'm like, oh, I didn't quite clock that to begin with. So I'm very excited to be able to jump back in and just absorb some of the outside bits that aren't just like Tony Collette shouting at a dinner table. I love films like that where you get sort of different things on different viewings, and I really think this is going to be a strong contender in that department. But the main thing overall that I really enjoyed about and thinking about ending things is the way that still Kaufman is able to pull off all of his batshit, crazy, surreal, metaphysical narrative isms and still make them feel like they're amounting to something, even if in the moment that's never 100% clear. I still felt things watching this film, even though I'm not sure I could ever really pinpoint exactly why I was feeling those things. It's a film which seems to be about so much without ever concretely saying, hey, this is what I'm about. And I know it can sound incredibly pretentious to sit here and say, well, it means whatever you think it means, huh? It's about whatever you want it to be about. But I kind of think that. But I do think there is enough in there to ground it and be like, yeah, okay, I know what it's going for. It doesn't just feel like a random collection of scenes and words that you're like, well, I'm going to go work out why any of that happened. I mean, I guess it kind of is. I think I'm digging myself into a hole here. I'm going to have to wrap it up there. We could be talking about this for a long time. Ultimately, I thought I'm Thinking of Ending Things was really fucking great. I really dug it. If you're a big fan of Charlie Kaufman's work, I think you're probably going to end up agreeing. I'd be very interested to see where it lands in your ranking of his filmography. For me, it's not at the top. I think I preferred it to Anomalisa, but it's nowhere near as good as Synecdoche in New York. And I mean, some of his written screenplays, I don't think this is his best either. As I said, Netflix has been churning out some big boys at the moment, so I'll see you guys soon for another Netflix original review. Ooh, whatever could it be? You can probably guess it. Until next time, stay beautiful, stay safe, don't do anything silly. It's looking like a fun end of the year, isn't it? He says sarcastically. What is this year been?